When we think of Italy, it's easy to picture a country united by its culture, history, and love for good food. However, the reality is that behind this facade lies one of the most striking divisions in Europe: the contrast between the North and the South. This difference isn't just geographic. It's economic, cultural, and even social, as demographic maps and economic studies clearly reveal. While the North is seen as the country's economic engine, with vibrant cities and robust infrastructure, the South often bears the reputation of being less developed, grappling with historical challenges that have shaped its path to this day. But how did these differences arise? And more importantly, how do they continue to impact modern Italy? To understand this division, we need to look back in time. Since medieval times, Italy was already a fragmented territory, with kingdoms and city-states that had completely different priorities. This historical legacy helped create a nation with two distinct rhythms: an industrialized north, closely integrated with Europe, and a south with more agricultural and traditional roots. These differences are more than just historical curiosities. They define Italy today and directly influence the opportunities and challenges faced by millions of Italians. This division is like a scar that has never fully healed, and that's precisely what we'll explore in this mini-documentary here on the channel. To better understand this story, let's start with the population distribution within the country. Italy displays a remarkable contrast when we look at where people are located. The north hosts the largest cities, with urban hubs like Milan, Turin, and Genoa forming densely populated regions. Meanwhile, the south, with vast rural areas, is home to a more dispersed population, where smaller, more isolated towns create a completely different dynamic. The infrastructure clearly reflects this disparity. The north boasts an efficient network of highways, high-speed railways, and modern airports that facilitate regional integration. In the south, the situation is less favorable. Poorly maintained roads, limited railways, and logistics that often hinder economic development. This difference directly impacts connectivity and the potential for regional growth. The roots of this disparity lie in how the country developed over the centuries. Industrialization transformed the north into a vibrant economic center, driving investments in infrastructure that never reached the same level in the south. This solidified a physical division in the country, limiting access to opportunities and deepening regional inequality. These geographical and structural conditions have shaped how people in each region live and interact. Beyond population density and infrastructure, another key factor is how these differences influence values and behaviors, such as civic participation and religious practices, which vary significantly between North and South. The differences between northern and southern Italy go beyond economy and infrastructure. They also manifest in cultural aspects like religious participation. In the South, religion plays a central role in people's lives. Churches are often packed, and religious celebrations bring entire communities together. In the North, while faith is also present, involvement in religious practices is noticeably lower, reflecting a more secularized context. This dynamic extends into the civic sphere as well. In the North, voter turnout rates tend to be higher, reflecting greater engagement in political decisions and public life. In the South, despite the strong presence of religion, political involvement is more inconsistent, with higher abstention rates in some areas. This contrast highlights how cultural and social values shape public engagement in different aspects of life. Historically, the South has maintained a closer connection to the Catholic Church, which played a significant role in shaping local communities and defining values. In the North, the processes of industrialization and urbanization fostered a society more focused on individualism and less tied to religious traditions. These factors help explain the differing relationships each region has with faith and politics. The interaction between religion and civic engagement creates a unique dynamic in Italy. This cultural divide is a core part of the country's identity, reflected in public policies and how local communities address challenges. But how do these cultural disparities relate to human and economic development indices? This connection helps link each region's values to the quality of life of its residents. When examining Italy's Human Development Index, HDI, regional differences become even more evident. Northern regions like Lombardy, Veneto, and Emilia-Romagna consistently rank among the highest in the country, with quality access to healthcare, education, and income. Meanwhile, southern regions such as Calabria and Sicily show lower numbers, reflecting historical and structural challenges that hinder social and economic progress. A clear example of this disparity was evident in 2017, when data showed that while the North led in access to basic services and opportunities, the South continued to face significant challenges in areas like education and employment. Despite these differences, it's important to note that even the less developed southern regions still boast HDI levels above the global average, highlighting the structural strength of the Italian state. These disparities aren't just statistical, they directly affect people's quality of life. In the North, healthcare is more accessible, education levels are higher, and economic opportunities are more abundant. In the South, the lack of consistent investment in social and economic infrastructure perpetuates a sense of stagnation, making progress difficult for many communities. The differences in HDI are part of a larger narrative about how resources and opportunities are distributed across Italy. But what truly drives this inequality? One of the answers lies in the economic performance of the regions, especially in GDP per capita, a factor that further amplifies the contrast between the North and South. In 2021, economic maps revealed that the North contributed a significant majority of the national GDP. Advanced industries, the service sector, and international trade drive the region's economy. In the South, the economy relies more heavily on sectors like agriculture and tourism, which, while important, generate less stable and lower financial returns. This imbalance remains one of the greatest challenges to Italy's economic development. The disparity in GDP per capita also has historical roots. The North, benefiting from early industrialization and proximity to major European markets, has attracted investments over the centuries. The South, by contrast, remained largely agricultural and received fewer investments, perpetuating a cycle of inequality that continues to this day. These figures help explain many of the social and structural issues faced by southern Italy, but also highlight an intriguing fact. Despite its challenges, the less developed regions of Italy still have economies larger than many countries worldwide. How has history contributed to this divide, and how does it shape Italy's future? The answer lies in the historical events that cemented this inequality. Its roots are deeply embedded in the history of a territory that, until the 19th century, was composed of separate kingdoms and states. While the North was influenced by European powers like the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which introduced industrial and administrative advancements, the South was under dynasties that prioritized a centralized, agrarian economy. The Italian unification process, completed in 1861, ended up consolidating these differences rather than eliminating them. During unification, resources from the South were redistributed to sustain the growth of the North. This included heavy taxes and a centralized political system that limited infrastructure and industrial development in the South. These factors created a foundation of inequality that persists in the regional disparities seen today. Another key point was industrialization. In the North, it began early, transforming cities like Milan and Turin into hubs of innovation and commerce. In the South, industrial initiatives were scarce and often stifled due to a lack of central government support. This historical disparity triggered a cycle of internal migration, with millions of Italians leaving the South in search of work in the North or abroad. These historical dynamics shaped not only the economy but also the social and political relationships between regions. This historical divide remains alive in public policy debates and in how the country seeks to better integrate its regions. But what challenges still prevent the South from achieving the same pace of development as the North? This is the question we explore as we examine the problems faced by southern Italy today. Despite its rich cultural heritage and stunning landscapes, southern Italy faces a series of challenges that limit its full development. One of the most evident problems is unequal access to economic opportunities. With an economy still heavily reliant on agriculture and tourism, the region struggles to diversify its productive base and attract investments in more dynamic sectors such as technology and industry. Another major obstacle is infrastructure. Poorly maintained roads, outdated railways, and an inefficient logistics system make the South's integration with the rest of the country slower and more expensive. This lack of connectivity directly impacts the region's economic competitiveness, hindering the flow of goods and access to national and international markets. Unemployment is also a persistent issue. Rates in the South are consistently above the national average, especially among young people. This fuels a cycle of internal and international migration, with many local talents leaving the region in search of better opportunities in the North or abroad, further exacerbating the South's difficulties in building a strong and diversified economy. Even so, it's important to recognize that southern Italy is not stuck in time. Compared to countries like Argentina or Chile, its level of development is high, showing that the problem isn't an absence of progress but rather the uneven pace of development compared to the North. This comparison also prompts us to think about Italy's position on the global stage, even with these internal differences. The regional disparities within Italy, while significant, still place the country in a unique position globally. Southern Italy, despite its struggles, boasts development indicators that surpass those of many nations worldwide. Regions like Calabria and Sicily, even with relatively lower HDI scores compared to the North, still maintain levels of health, education, and income above the global average. To put this into perspective, southern Italy has indicators comparable to countries like Argentina and Chile, which are considered strong emerging economies. However, this comparison also highlights how northern Italy operates at a level comparable to European economic powers like Germany and France. This dichotomy makes Italy a unique example of regional disparity within a single developed nation. In the European context, few countries exhibit an internal contrast as pronounced as Italy's. Less developed regions in countries like Spain or France are still closer to their wealthier counterparts than southern Italy is to the Italian north. This makes Italy a peculiar case, where a single country combines characteristics of both advanced and developing economies within its borders. This reality underscores the complexity of Italian unity. Despite its internal challenges, Italy remains one of the world's largest economies, balancing these regional disparities. Yet the question remains, how can the country overcome these divides without losing its historical and cultural identity? The division between northern and southern Italy is not merely geographical. It's a deep imprint on the country's history and identity. These differences shape everything from the economy to cultural values, creating realities that often seem worlds apart. While the North enjoys advanced infrastructure, industrialized cities, and strong ties to European markets, the South struggles to overcome historical challenges, striving to transform its immense potential into sustainable development. Looking at the North, we see a region that thrived with industrialization and became synonymous with modernity. Milan, for example, is a global hub for fashion, finance, and innovation. Its highways, high-speed railways, and diverse economy drive Italy's international standing. In the south, although natural beauty, history, and culture are sources of wealth, poor infrastructure and high unemployment hinder growth. This duality within a single country is both fascinating and concerning. Despite the challenges, southern Italy is not a forgotten land. Regions like Sicily and Calabria hold immense potential. Agriculture and tourism, if properly leveraged, could transform these areas into thriving development hubs. But to achieve this, temporary solutions won't suffice. Structural investments, educational incentives, and initiatives to promote local entrepreneurship are indispensable to breaking the cycle of stagnation. This requires a long-term vision, something that has often been overlooked in Italy's political and economic debates. This disparity is not just an internal issue for Italians. It also reflects challenges faced by many countries. Regional inequalities exist worldwide, but Italy stands out for presenting such stark differences within a relatively small territory. This reality reminds us that the true strength of a nation lies not only in the success of its most developed regions, but also in its ability to create opportunities for all its parts, especially those most in need of attention. Italy's future depends on its ability to balance these differences and harness the wealth that comes from its diversity. Bridging the gap between North and South won't be an easy task, but it's essential for the country to strengthen itself as a whole. After all, what defines a nation is not just its past history, but how it confronts present challenges to build a more just and balanced future. Now, enjoy this next documentary here on the screen.